Good morning. I am Norman Kerr, Director of the Office of Violence Reduction. As you hear us say weekly, Mayor Lightfoot is committed to an all-government and all-city response to address violence. The Summer Safety Strategy is a coordinated effort that includes participation from various city departments to collectively focus on 15 areas on the south and west side of Chicago due to consistent violence in these beats over the past 3 summers. And while we are grateful to CPD, Chicago Public Libraries, and the Department of Buildings, to name a few, today I want to lift up the work that our community partners have demonstrated, not just over the weekends, but on a nightly basis all year. These are concerned groups that are engaging those that are violent and likely to be violent, and those that are likely to be victimized, and these groups are engaging them to help address their needs. Street outreach teams are working throughout the city to interrupt violence before it happens and to mitigate possible retaliation. These are individuals who have gone through 144 hours of training and are battle tested in the field. Many of these partners are working long hours on the weekends until 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and even 6 a.m., putting their lives in harm's way. It is paramount that I express condolences to families that have experienced the loss of loved ones this year. I know firsthand, as unfortunately many Chicagoans do, the devastating loss that violence brings to families. Our victim services partners are working vigorously to support individuals and families that have been impacted by violence as needed. In challenging times like this, we must remain to stay the course and work diligently together. Again, we want to acknowledge our city departments and give special thanks to our community partners for their tireless contributions to help increase the safety of our communities and our city. Thank you. I'd like to pass it to Deputy Chief Navales.
Good morning, everybody. Norman, thank you very much, and for all the hard work you and your folks are doing to support the whole city approach in helping us out here in the Chicago Police Department to decrease violence. So one of the things in community policing that we know, and we know it's incredibly important to the city, is our effort to reach the youth of the city of Chicago. We understand that in an effort to mitigate historical and generational effects that affect the young folks, and also to attempt to address that trauma by coaching and mentoring, we've rolled out 2 programs recently. These programs are scheduled to start in September, but as the city opened up, we felt it was incredibly important to reach the young folks in the city of Chicago. The first program we rolled out is the Neighborhood Youth Corps. This is a program in partnership with CHA. This is a wellness-based program. What we want to do is not only be able to build relationships with the youth, but also have that opportunity to coach and mentor to try to address some of those traumas. It's a speaker-based series where we engage the youth and try to broaden their horizons. We also give them the opportunity to engage with entrepreneurs across the city of Chicago. We also have them interact with law enforcement agencies, not just our own, but the Cook County Sheriffs and others. And then we take them outside where they're comfortable, their neighborhoods, to field trips, like the yacht club at Jefferson Park. We're taking them out to a food dispensary so they understand the importance of giving. This is a 6-week program. It closes with a capstone project where the youth and some of the staff up here will work with the kids for this program to close it off. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was the PAL, the Police Athletic and Arts League. Once again, this was a program that was going to roll out a little later, but as the city opened up, we felt it was incredibly important to reach the youth of the city of Chicago. So the Chicago PAL program, in partnership with the Chicago Park District, with the Police Athletic League of the city of Chicago, the National Black McDonald's Operators Association, and the Chicago Knights baseball team, will be hosting a series of baseball camps once again to try to reach the younger youth in our city. The youth will be from the ages of 6 to 13 years of age, those years where the kids are most impressionable, where we can make those inroads. They will be occurring at Hamilton Park, Garfield Park, Humboldt Park, West Pullman, Foster Park, and Columbus Park. What we want to do is, with your help, let all the parents out there know to please trust us with the opportunity to coach your children so we can make those inroads. If you want to register your child, please, you can reach us at PAL, P-A-L, at chicagopolice.org and register your child there. or you can reach our office at 312-745-5900, or you can sign up at any of those sites. With that being said, thank you very much. And thank you very much for everybody up here for all the hard work they've done this summer.
Now, I'll make a few comments. I'm going to recap my visit on yesterday, as you all know, at the White House with President Biden and Attorney General Garland, along with other police and city leaders, to include Mayor Bowser with Washington, D.C., and Bronx Bureau Representative Eric Adams. So the discussion was significant and substantive. We actually spent an extra hour that was not scheduled. It was scheduled for 1 hour. We ended up carrying over the discussion an additional hour. There was a shared vision amongst the group about the need to have a sense of urgency. There was an agreement that there must be real consequences for serious crimes. We discussed both short-term and long-term solutions. Public safety and community building and reinvestment was discussed, and there was consensus that those two go hand in hand. There was an emphasis amongst the group of stopping the flow of illegal guns into our cities is key to solving some of the violent crimes that we're seeing. In the coming days here in Chicago, we will be rolling out some of our strategy to include the strike force and other gun trafficking investigative strategies. As the mayor, Mayor Lightfoot, says, it will take a whole of government approach, which includes our federal, county, and state partners. And the impact should be viewed as the public safety ecosystem, to include the root causes of crime from a public health approach as the long-term strategy. I did get an opportunity to talk one-on-one with Attorney General Garland, who's a native of Chicago. And finally, there will be significant follow-up. This wasn't a one-off meeting. We had actionable items that we listed, and we left with a point of contact for follow-up. There were several things that needed some follow-up that couldn't be resolved in the discussion. Now I'll go right into some additional comments I'd like to make on a different subject, if you don't mind. I'm going to go through what we kind of go through all the time, kind of the weekend, this past weekends, even though it's Tuesday, we normally have this Monday report over the past weekend's challenges as it relates to our crime strategy. Over the weekend, there were 94 guns recovered by Chicago police officers. Every gun recovery is a potential deadly force encounter, as we've recounted multiple times, and every gun recovery is a potential life saved, since we are experiencing extraordinary gun violence. Year to date, the gun recoveries are up 27%. We've recovered 6,362 guns so far this year. Of those 6,000 guns, 321 are assault weapons. And now I'd like to highlight a particular notable case that occurred over the weekend. Shortly before 9 p.m. on July 10th, in the 10th District, officers responded to a multiple shot spotter technology alert, followed by multiple calls of a person shot just down the street from the Cook County Jail. Upon arrival, officers discovered 31-year-old Londre, Londre, Sylvester, common spelling, lying on the parkway unresponsive from having sustained multiple gunshot wounds to the head and body. Approximately 59 fired shell casings were scattered on the street near this scene. Additional officers discovered 2 women who miraculously escaped serious harm. One sustained a graze wound, and the other was struck in the knee. Sylvester was transported to Mount Sinai Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The 2 women are listed in good condition. And then we recount what our Area 4 detectives learned after their initial investigation of this case to seek out evidence for bringing offenders to justice on this. Sylvester was released from Cook County Jail, as we talked about, and walking out of the jail, he was shot and killed, and 2 other women were injured. He was released from custody and placed on electronic monitoring as a condition of his bond. So he walked out on electronic monitoring. He was in custody on multiple charges, including armed habitual and felony aggravated assault with a vehicle against the arresting officers in that felony assault. On August 1st, this is a lot of information. I'm going to try to talk a little slow so you can get it all in. On August 1st of 2020, Sylvester was paroled and discharged. On the 29th of December 2020, Sylvester was put on electronic monitoring and released. On the 1st of June 2021, Sylvester was given permission to leave the jurisdiction on electronic monitoring. On June the 15th, 2021, the state filed a petition for a violation of bond on Sylvester. On the 21st of June 2021, Sylvester was back in custody, it appears, for a violation of his electronic monitoring. On July 1st, the court granted the motion for the initial parole violation and set bond at $50,000 in electronic monitoring. And on July 10th, after this bond was met, this $50,000 bond was met, he was released for his next court date. He was released on electronic monitoring for what is the second or third time for his court date on July 27, which, of course, he will be unable to since he's deceased. By the time Sylvester died from the hail of gunfire, he had a total of 22 arrests, 7 felony, 12 misdemeanor, and 2 convictions. If not for his lifestyle choices, Londre Sylvester's death most assuredly endangered everyone around him. The 3 words inked beneath the target tattoo on his throat, on Sylvester's throat, summed up his lifestyle. Kill to survive was his tattoo. Sylvester was in custody, as I mentioned, on Cook County Jail on multiple charges, including armed habitual and felony aggravated assault. He was a parole UUW, unauthorized use of a weapon by a felon. He was a convicted felon for using a firearm. His long criminal record didn't keep him there long. He was accompanied, the 2 women, by a 60-year-old woman. He walked down the street to his vehicle, and he was headed back into this community. As you know, he never made it. This targeted execution were by 2 vehicles that exited, or gunmen exited these 2 vehicles and fired multiple times. As I mentioned, they left behind 59 fired shell casings. It's a miracle that the 2 women, one accompanying Sylvester and the other just an innocent bystander, are not associated with him at all. It's miraculous that they weren't shot and killed as well. All these prior arrests, these serious felonies, these very violent crimes, didn't keep him in jail. And it created an unsafe environment for others to put him on electronic monitoring. It's incredible that he was eligible for electronic monitoring. It's madness. It's making us all less safe. If one life is saved by this discussion of violent offenders, dangerous people being released into the community, and this debate, whether you want to call it finger pointing, which this gallery has called it, we call it dissent, and we call it strong advocacy for victims. Mr. Sylvester is a victim. He was murdered. These two women were shot. They're victims. And law enforcement, all of us standing here before you, are sworn to be advocates for victims. This year so far, detectives have cleared at least 188 homicide cases as we continue to work to seek justice for victims of senseless violence. Clearance rate is at 49.2%, currently on pace to surpass last year's historic 15-year high in cleared cases. Examples of a couple of more cases. Brian Tart, 36 of the 2300 block of West Washington Boulevard, was arrested by members of the Great Lakes Regional Task Force on July 8th, 2021 in the 1800 block of Markland in Indiana. He was identified as the offender who on October 18, 2020 shot and killed a 26-year-old woman in the 7500 block. He was charged with one felony count of murder in the first degree. Great police work. Raquan Drake, 22, in the 1800 block of South Paulino, was arrested on July 10, 2021 in the 1900 block of Ogden, West Ogden, at approximately 8 p.m. He was identified as the offender who several hours earlier shot and killed a 26-year-old man in the 1800 block of South Paulino. He was charged with one count of felony murder in the first degree. Chicago cops are doing their part, putting violent people in jail and charging them with murder. Finally, before I take questions, a total of 35 Chicago police officers have been shot at or shot this year. 9 of those 35 have been struck by gunfire. This follows last year's 79 Chicago police officers who were shot at or shot, the most ever on record in Chicago's history. Despite the risk to their own personal safety, Chicago police officers continue to show up to protect the people of Chicago. God bless Chicago police officers, the men and women and their families. With that, I'll take questions.
You mentioned that there will be short-term and long-term solutions facing this increase in violence. Can you specify what are the short-term solutions?
Can't specify this enough, and I know I'm being repetitive. Keeping violent offenders in jail longer will reduce violent crime in Chicago. We not are against advocacy for the offender. We are not against advocacy for offenders. We believe offenders, reentry programs, we believe there should be resources, we believe there should be jobs and job training and education, we believe there should be mental health services, drug treatment services, we believe in all that. But we also believe, more importantly, in the prioritization of victims and the Constitution's right to life and liberty being paramount, more than anything else we discuss. The priority for government is to protect people. But we don't disagree with advocacy for offenders and all the services they need. We're just making our point strongly and unapologetically for victims. Victims. People who are murdered and their families. That's who our advocacy is paramount for. Next question.
Superintendent, Ida B. Wells once said, the people must know before they can act, and there is no educator to compare with the press. So as we try to educate the public about this strike force thing and how you're looking to work with the feds, What is your hope and vision for how this strike force might operate to better help keep Chicago safe?
I think the biggest part of the whole of government approach is to bring in all of our, first of all, law enforcement partners being on the same pace, working on the same types of cases. So the strike force is a great example of this, where alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, ATF, the strike force is a collaboration between ATF and the Chicago Police Department to include an increase in the capacity to, number one, do the work that they're already focused on doing, gun traces to crime. When, as I mentioned, these 59 casings found at that scene, those casings will be put in a system, and that work will be done in collaboration with ATF to identify the guns used, so that when we have arrests made by offenders and gun recoveries, we can charge people based on that investigative work. So gun trace to crime is one part. The second part, though, is the work that needs to be done with a greater sense of urgency on the front end of violent crime, where handguns are used or assault rifles are used, where we focus on the flow of guns. The strike force will focus on the flow of guns, which includes buyers and sellers of illegal guns. We'll have more to come. We'll have more to come on that particular issue. We'll roll out this strike force plan to include an internal work group collaborating with this strike force, but that's some more detail and more to come.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Jessica. What did the Biden administration offer you that you don't already have here in Chicago? And did the president or anyone else in the White House mention gun control legislation? I'm Timon Bradley, WGN TV.
So one of the things that was offered up was, number one, President did a lot of listening. I know that seems like a trivial thing, but he really listened. And he was honest about what he wanted to focus on. In addition to listening, being open and honest, we talked about strategies that are working at some level and increasing the capacity. So one of the officers was to increase the capacity to deal with this extraordinary increase in violent crime across this country. Any and all resources. There's some already on the table. The ARP money is on the table for the criminal justice ecosystem, to include many of the things we talked about earlier before I began discussing programs with young people, jobs, street outreach, violence interrupters. I mean, the whole ecosystem, not just the enforcement piece. That's one part of it. I mean, the most dangerous people need to be taken off the streets. That's clearly our focus from a law enforcement perspective, but there's an ecosystem here that we all have to focus on. This is not going to be a mass incarceration effort. We know that didn't work. But this can't be releasing violent people back to these communities to not only endanger others, but endanger the very people you are releasing. It is not making us safer. It's not making offenders safer, nor is it making the people around them safer.
What about gun control? Was that mentioned in the discussion?
If it was, I don't remember. Next question.
Superintendent Brown, just kind of going back on the strike force issue and a description of how it will look, how it will work. I know I covered a news conference years ago where the ATF was pledging resources where they have a machine that they can bring out to a crime scene, fire a gun and do ballistics on the scene. Are they offering things like that to you, the ATF, to come out to scenes with you? And is that what this strike force is going to look like? I'm just trying to picture it in my head.
We gave enough detail for you to hold your powder dry until we roll out our program. We've got a couple of more things we want to look at as far as what the components of this program, but we gave enough of a briefing a few minutes ago to I answered your question of what kind of the framework is. And then we want to roll out in the next few days the more detail regarding resources, people, infrastructure, technology, and the like. I sure did. And got some White House cookies, by the way, that my daughter gobbled up. Yes.
I'm Joe Barrett with the Wall Street Journal. How much of your criticism of the courts right now has to do with bail reform, and how much has to do more with COVID protocols? And then how much of the problem do you think is it really contributing? Like, I mean, what number of murders do you think are related to actually violent people being back out on the streets when they shouldn't be?
So many people ask the questions you just asked. So hopefully you don't take this as picking on you. I get asked when you say we can't release violent people. And then we get into, well, is this bail reform? Is this COVID? Is this criticism of the courts? And I just stick with, if one person is saved, whether that person is the offender or people walking with the offender, walking around the offender in a crowd trying to enjoy their Sunday evening with the offender, if one person is saved. I haven't put a label on this, nor have I said who's responsible. It's a criminal justice system. I'm trying to move the needle on violent offenders not being released back into these communities, risking all of our safety. I mean, any one of you could be having lunch on a patio, sitting next to an offender on EM who others are targeting to kill, and you could get shot and killed trying to enjoy your day because someone has made the decision that offenders' rights trump victims' rights. Offenders have rights, but when they harm all of us, when they are targeted for retaliation, street justice, revenge, whatever you want to call it, and others are put in harm's way, we need to rethink that policy, whatever that label is, because the advocacy in our Constitution is for the individual rights to liberty and freedom and safety from a government standpoint. That's our role, is to keep people safe. Yes?
Did you explain your position on this issue to the president and Mr. Garland, and what did they have to say about the issue?
So this is not my position on this issue. This is all of our position. We want to be safe, right? We all want to be safe. And what can we do to be safe? This is prevalent throughout the country, as you know, this issue. There's a tension, and there's a healthy tension between the courts and law enforcement. We shouldn't be judge, juror, and jailer. I'm not trying to be the person that decides the sentencing. I want to move the needle on making us safer. That's my role. There is consensus on this issue amongst law enforcement and many others looking at this. Whether or not the pendulum is swinging much more moderate decision-making in this area or not, I think is yet to be determined. But this is not my position. This is a position that we all should have on how to reduce violence in our country and our city.
Have you spoken directly with the state attorney or the chief judge about your concerns recently, or tried to schedule a meeting with them?
We have had multiple meetings, but this discussion should not be in a back room. This timeout for backroom deals on public safety. This discussion should be had right where we're having it, in the public square, for all of us to weigh in on. Do we agree as a society that violent offenders should be released back into these communities, making us all unsafer? That's the public square discussion. It's not finger pointing. Do we agree with this? Yes.
I'm wondering,
This is the last question. This is the last question. Thank you.
Well, then before you go, Superintendent, I'm wondering if you could lay out your bigger gang takedown strategy. Are you working with the U.S. Attorney to identify, detain, and prosecute gang members?
Yes, and expedite their prosecutions. I think that's many conspiracy cases. When we talk about gangs, we're talking about the conspiracy to commit their crimes. 2 or more, 3 or more, conspiring to commit violence. It is really the heading for our effort. And it can take months, if not years, to close out these cases. Our discussion recently has been creating the capacity to shorten the length of time to bring these people to justice, whether it's criminal conspiracy, criminal enterprise, criminal network, whatever the conspiracy is, whether it's for violent crime, whether it's for drugs, which drive often the violent crime. We want to create the capacity. That's attorneys, that's task force officers, and that's DEA, FBI, focus, creating the capacity to bring these cases to a close sooner rather than the months and years it would normally take.
So then you haven't had any big major gang takedowns yet? You're still
Multiple ones, but we just can't penetrate the news cycle. We did a conference, when was that, Jose, a couple of weeks ago? Yeah, well, we recounted several cases where we had some major takedowns. For whatever reason, we can't penetrate the news cycle, but we're going to keep at it. And I'll make a note, next time we'll go through some more cases.
Bring them.
And we might put our director of comms to work and give you some cases on the side to report on, just in between news conferences. So we said last question, and every time we get two more. So we'll take two more, and then that's going to be the last two, okay?
So, Superintendent, we've had strike forces before. We did Operation Legend, that came through. How is this strike force going to be any different than what's been done in the past? And how hopeful are you that it's actually going to make a difference and not just be another strike force?
I think one of the things that's important to note here regarding the strike force is that it's more than that. It's monies, support, beyond funding for impacts on the public safety ecosystem from a whole of government approach. That's unique. We hadn't had that from the top. It is so encouraging that funding for street outreach, programs for intervention for our young people, jobs and the like, is part of this public safety effort. If you'd had that in the 90s, we'd be in a different place right now, instead of just mass incarceration. So this is the first of effort that's different than we've ever seen. We're so excited about getting to work on this because, again, some is short-term, like I mentioned, but a lot of this will be a long-term strategy that impacts young people and adults in changing their behavior, not just incarceration. I think we had one last question.
Naima Latif with the On Air News Network.
He actually had the last question, and
Well,
so,
just quickly, because I know people worry about this. How do we prevent the average young person who may fit a profile from being unfairly profiled in this quest to end the violence?
So one of the things, as we started, that's why we started it this way, the Police Athletically programs where law enforcement interact with young people is one part of what we're discussing. And Norm Kerr came before that debriefing that we gave, talking about the work that Street Outreach is doing, deployed out in the community to try to tamp down on many of the beefs that lead to violence, many of the arguments, conflict resolution, and the training that they get to tamp down on the decisions young people make, to help them make a better, different decision than to pick up a gun. Last question.
I was just wondering, what specifically did the President or Mr. Garland say on the topic of bail reform and releasing violent offenders?
So the President can speak for himself. I'm not his comms director, so I would just refer you to the White House on comments regarding bail reform and other political discussions directly from the White House. I'm not going to be the spokesman for the White House, above my pay grade, and I've got a full plate of work to do beyond being a comms director for the White House. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.